Hi everybody and welcome back to my channel. We are back today with a tumbler tutorial and we are doing a leopard print swirl. So these are one of my favorite types of tumblers to make, and this was actually inspired by an Instagram live I was on, or that I was hosting I should say, on my Instagram profile, and it was given to me by one of my lovely followers and gals who suggested doing a leopard swirl in a winter wonderland fashion for an upcoming swap that I had been part of. So I decided to do this a little bit different for the tutorial, and I'm going to show you two versions of a leopard swirl. So first, of course, we started out with this 30-ounce tumbler that you have watched me prep, and that is going to be for our winter wonderland leopard swirl. Right now we're using a 24-ounce plump that we are using multiple different spray paints to spray paint on the swirl, which is going to help us find the color patterns, the matching colors, I should say, in glitter when we apply this, when we apply the glitters to this cup. So I've used several different spray paints. I've used a gold, I'm using a deep purple from Rustoleum, deep turquoise from Rustoleum, and then I'm using actually a yellow, and that is because I'm using two versions of a gold. One is more of a yellow metallic, I would say, versus a true gold, or what I would say is a true gold. So we're going to use a yellow just to highlight that section so I can make sure to implement that color as well. And for this, I was getting moody vibes from this. And this color palette kind of just came to mind after seeing the Winter Wonderland palette, which I will show you after we glitter this one. But that was kind of the inspiration. I wanted to kind of do a deep dark version of that other kind of color palette. So we're going to go ahead and apply our colors, our glitter, using the epoxy method. And so I have mixed up about 10 mLs of epoxy, a little bit more than I normally would, only because we are doing 2 cups for this purpose. I am using Artist Cure though. I try to do Artist Cure if I'm going to be layering a lot of different colors. If I'm only doing 1 or 2 colors, I'll do Fast Set. But because I knew I was doing 2 cups, I knew we needed a little bit of additional time just to get through the glittering process. So the way that I like to do this is, I tell you guys this all the time, anytime I am going to be doing multiple colors of glitters on a cup, I like to start with my chunkiest colors and then move to my finer colors, okay? I always like to have at least 2 cuts of the color of each of the colors that are going to be present on the cup. I find that that just gives sort of the best depth and dimension to really kind of give just, I don't know, when you have those different kind of cuts of color, you will just be in awe of the amount of sparkle that you get with having different cuts of color versus just 1 cut of color. So I love to layer glitter this way. It's just my favorite way to do things. Now, have I done sort of swirls and patterns like this with single cuts of glitter, like the same cut of glitter? Yep, for sure. I have also done it all chunky. I've done it all fine. So you can certainly do that way too. I just really love the look that I get when I am layering my colors. So I know I haven't told you any of these glitter colors. Please don't fret. You guys know, of course, I will have all of the glitters that we're using down in the description box, as well as links to where you can grab those. And if I have discount codes for you, you guys know, of course, I will also list that down in the description box to save you a little bit of money, of course, while you're out there shopping for your craft supplies. So after I've done and gone through all of my chunkies, we're now moved on to either the medium cuts, if I had the medium cuts in those colors, or we've moved on to the finer cuts of those, okay? So right now we're using the turquoise color, and this is Martha from Batty Glitter. And this is just going to lay over that chunky hummingbird color that I had for that deep turquoise section. Don't forget to glitter your butt. I have to always remind myself to glitter my butt because I can get so kind of warped into what I'm doing around the cup that sometimes I forget the bottom. So definitely make sure that you also glitter the butt. So this color is Aslan. This is Aslan from Peachy Olive Glitters. I've had this glitter for a really long time and I've never really found a real purpose for it, if that makes sense. Like, it's never come up for me to like use, but it's a really pretty like yellow gold color. So I really thought that this would help me sort of play into that moody color with just a little bit of brightness, but not too much brightness. And it kind of just blends in just perfectly into the actual gold color we have present on the cup. And I'm actually really happy with that because it did help me keep my colorants, which I'll show, of course, later in the tutorial, kind of away from that gold section, and kind of just created like a buffer without having so much purple and like deep turquoise. So I really love how this whole vibe is coming together. So finally, we're going to end things off with Wisteria, which is the finest cut of color glitter that I used for this particular cup. And that is just going to cover up that purple, deep purple section and kind of brighten it just a little bit, just a hint of brightness there. So after this is done, since we did epoxy method, I do let this dry for a few hours. I think I let it dry for like 4 to 6 hours. You can do a little bit less because, again, you're not using a whole lot of epoxy on this, but I want to make sure that that epoxy is settled and it is pretty much fully cured before I go in to do my leopard spots. I personally like to do my leopard spots on top of raw glitter. I just feel like if I'm going to do all the glittering, I'm going to do it all at the same time. I'd rather not have to wait steps. So if I can, get the glittering process done in one kind of fell swoop, then that's typically the route that I'm taking. On occasion, if I am deciding later on to put leopard spots on, I might end up doing it over epoxy, but my preferred method is always over in the raw glitter sort of state of the cup. So we're going to do 2 colored spots. We're going to use Martha and we're going to use Wisteria, and we're just going to kind of put those center spots all over in those sections. Again, I'm avoiding that swirled area, so I'm avoiding where the Aslan starts and where that purple and deep turquoise section starts, and just solely focusing on keeping all of my leopard spots to be in that center gold area. Now, after we've glittered that section, we've waited just a few minutes for things to just settle and dry so it's not too goopy with my Mod Podge, but now we're going to go back in and do the actual leopard spots or shapes around those solid colors in the center here. And you'll also see that I did some additional leopard print sections like outside of where we added those dots, and that was just to fill up the space a little bit. I can always tell if I'm going to have like really large spaces, and I don't particularly like to have a lot of space in between my leopard print. I don't necessarily like them to be right up against each other, but I do like there to be sort of more of a clustered look. So I went back in just with a couple extra spots to add to this to kind of just fill up that section a bit. And the glitter that we're using, the black, is actually what we used in the last tutorial that I have a challenge for. We did that with just some Binks from Batty Glitter and a little bit of like a white glitter to go in to give it a bit of extra sparkle. So now we are on to our Winter Wonderland leopard print here. And so for this one, I didn't show you the spray painting process, but certainly you can, of course, catch that on Instagram if you feel like watching that live. And so I will, though, list all of the spray paint colors that I used in the description box, most of which were Rustoleum colors. Some of the ones I always tend to gravitate to. I didn't quite have like a purple, like a lavender purple in my current spray paint stock. So I ended up just going in with candy pink to be my purple for this because I knew that that would blend well. I didn't want to go too dark because then it would be a much darker purple. So I decided to go on the lighter side so that that lavender color would really kind of show off in those sections. So same process we did with the first one. We're going to go in with our chunkiest of glitters first to really sort of lay the landscape and outline where all of our glitters are meant to fall. I don't start to blend any of my colors until I get to those middle sized glitter colors, okay? I tend to use my chunkies to just sort of outline where things are going to go, but I don't use those to blend necessarily. I like to save the blending for my medium and finer cut glitters because those are a little bit easier to maneuver and move with and get to lay where you need them to. Sometimes chunky glitter just goes where it wants to go. So I like to kind of rely on those medium and finer cut glitters if I need to blend in between different colored sections. So I have 2 or 3 glitters as mentioned for each of these sections. Most of them have like a chunky and a medium cut. In a couple of the sections though, I was able to find 3 colors that kind of complemented each other for the color palette that I was going for. And I was able to do, a chunky, medium, and fine cut. But that's not always the case. And so sometimes if I don't have a chunky color of something, I will substitute that with like a translucent white, chunky white glitter. So in the first cup, you saw that under Aslan, I put a chunky white down, and that's just to give a little bit of depth and stuff. But because the color I used, which was Quinn, is a translucent white glitter, like an opal-y kind of glitter, it's not going to change the color of the spray paint under it. It will just kind of mimic or mirror that color. And so sometimes kind of like a cheat way that I like to do things is I'll layer that white if I don't have a chunky color in the color that I'm going to be using, if that makes sense. So we're going to finish up this swirl here. Of course, I know I didn't list all the glitters here, but you know I'll have them down in the description box. They are a combination of Batty glitter, some peachy olive. I do have some discontinued colors as well that I used on both of these cups, but I will let you know what that color was and then offer you a substitute that would be a good substitute for that glitter color. So we are back now to do our leopard sprints. Same process here. The only thing we're going to do that's a little bit different is I am going to tint my Mod Podge. So because we're using lighter pastel colors, sometimes just using plain white Mod Podge can certainly make the translucent colors kind of disappear on a darker base, like a gold or something that's darker. So to kind of brighten that up and make sure that I don't lose the true color of the glitters I'm going to be using for the spots, I'm going to tint my Mod Podge just with a bit of acrylic paint. We just went with lavender because it was the first thing that I grabbed. I'm going to use this for both the lavender spots and the blue spots that we're going to be putting on here, the light blue spots we're going to be putting on here as well. It's not going to change the color of the blue. You're still very much going to be able to see that that is a blue glitter for sure. So don't think that it's going to give you a deeper purple. But the color that I used for the blue, which was Bluebell from Batty Glitter, it is not as sort of translucent and transparent as the lavender color that I'm using. So first thing we're doing, of course, we're laying our spots down. And I'm just making sure I have, you know, a generous amount of both the purple and the blue. Making sure I don't have too much in one area of the same color. And then we'll go in and of course add that glitter over top. We've let that glitter sort of set and let that Mod Podge just start to begin to dry a bit. We don't want there to be any running or any areas where we might have too much Mod Podge, and let that mix when we go to add the outside leopard spots. Then we switch back to regular Mod Podge, just plain old Mod Podge, and we're going to do our spots or outlines around all of those colored spots on this gold section, and then we'll go in with our black glitter, of course, around. So I am going to go back in, as you're going to see me in a second, to add some additional spots in those open areas. And again, I just like to have a really full looking leopard print area. If I'm going to commit to leopard print, I'm totally committing. So I really like to cover up the space as much as possible without having my spots, of course, touch. So going in just with plain Mod Podge in some of those areas for just black spots or black like C-shaped areas to mimic those smaller leopard print spots that don't have the inside color. Finishing up the glittering section here with that black, we'll tap this off and then we will be able to move on to our next step. So the next thing that I'm going to do, and you're not going to see that because we are going to get right into the swirl action. Otherwise, this would be like an hour-long tutorial. But the next thing that I typically do after I have glittered my entire cup, especially for something like this that has a lot of glitter and a lot of different colors on it, I'm going to let it sit, let it fully and completely dry, of course, and then I'm going to spray seal this. I tend to spray seal with clear Rustoleum spray paint. You can do in gloss or matte, any preference, and whatever your preference is, you can use. That's typically what I like to use. And this ensures that I don't have any, you know, transfer of glitter into sections I don't want them to be. So this is especially important with like the leopard print because you don't want those black specks of glitter getting all over your cup. So once I did that, I did end up putting a couple coats of Fast Cure Epoxy from Flint Sister Supply Shop to coat these and make them almost smooth. They are not perfectly smooth. They definitely don't have a smooth top or a smooth bottom, but for the most part, the majority of the cup is smooth, okay? So now we're gonna move into our swirls here. And so I have already put a layer of epoxy on these cups. So I mixed up about 120 mLs of epoxy. So I did probably a little less than 20 mLs on these two cups, and then I'm going to split up what is left of that epoxy, and we're going to go ahead and add our colorants. So most of which I'm using is acrylic paint. So I have a black, I have a turquoise, I have a deep blue, like a navy galaxy blue color for the Moody swirl we have. And then for the pastel, we have a mint, we have a lavender, and then we're using a white epoxy pigment from Alumilite. So we're going to go ahead and get these all mixed up so we're ready to go. We're going to focus on our Moody swirl first. And we'll kind of get that one with its swirls on before we move on to the Winter Wonderland Leopard Swirl. So I like to start with sort of what is going to be, I like to call this like my highlight or low light color. So I either will start with, depending on what the color vibe is, I'll either start with the black or the white of that. So almost like if this was going to be a Milky Way, if I was treating this like a Milky Way tumbler, I would always start with my white and then add my like my other highlighting colors that are kind of more matchy, if that makes sense. After that, it's kind of just whichever of the other colors I'm going to use just goes next. But I like to always make sure I have more of the highlight, low light color that's going to go on here before I add the sort of like matchy or complementary colors to go with the vibe of the cup. So we're starting with white on the Winter Wonderland, and then we'll go back in with our lavender and we'll go in with our mint color. So when I'm choosing colors too for these kinds of cups, so like whether it's a Milky Way, which is, you know, kind of what we're doing here essentially, right? I always just try and choose ones that match the glitters I'm using. I don't need it to necessarily be spot on, but something that is kind of along the same color palette and vibe. I'll make sure that I'm layering those colors though, that colored epoxy on the opposite. So obviously like for my purple sections, I'm putting the mint color on top of that colorant. And for the, you know, for the moody swirl, I'm layering the teal color on that purple, that mainly deep purple color. And that's just so that you're really going to be able to still see those colors really vibrantly. If you match it right on top of it, it kind of blends in. So then to get these colors to move, I stop my turner and I kind of just hand turn it, rotate it as I apply heat from my heat gun. I don't like to apply too much heat, just really in those areas where I have some thicker sections to kind of thin it out a little bit. That way I can go in with my gloved hand and a paper towel and just clean up anything that's too thick, anything that doesn't look right. This is sort of just my cleanup process so that I have a really satisfying looking set of swirls on my cup. So this is really the part where you get to play and decide how you want things to turn out. You can go back and add more colorant if you've removed too much, or you can certainly leave as is. As I always say, I always err on the side of caution. Less is always more. Start with just a few lines of color, because remember, you can always add more. It gets to be a really big pain in the butt, and sometimes all of your colors will meld together if you put too much on there to start. So definitely a few strings of those colors first will definitely get you a long way, and then you can always add more if you need to. So now that these swirls have been finished and our cups are cured, we're going to go in and do all of our sanding at this point in time. Really focusing on the top rim, the bottom that might have a little bit of some rogue stray glitter still sticking up, making sure we have a nice smooth bottom to all of our cups and that we don't have any wobble whatsoever when it sits on the table. So we'll do this to both of these cups, and then of course we can go ahead and get these cleaned up. You can take them inside and clean them with, of course, you know, dish soap and water if you choose. I am always just in my craft space, and it's just kind of a pain sometimes to take it all the way upstairs to go wash them. So I will just use a paper towel and some rubbing alcohol. If you feel like you still have a lot of grit on your cups, you can use something called a tack cloth, which does remove a lot of that debris too. Now, tack cloth is very sticky, so sometimes people don't prefer to use it. They feel like it adds more sort of debris to their cups. I like to do this as sort of like a final thing to do before I do my final coats, and that just ensures I don't have any rogue pieces of debris from the sanding or from something else that might have picked up, you know, along my trip from the cleaning process back to the turner. So now we're going to do our final coats of epoxy here. So I'm using Flint Sisters Artist Cure, of course, for this part of the step, you know, our final steps. I always use Artist Cure to really seal these and get a beautiful shine on these cups. So I mixed up another 60 to 80 mLs of epoxy, and we're going to go ahead and get those on here. I like to have a pretty decent coat of epoxy on these, usually anywhere from 20 to 30 mLs for cups like this. And that was it. So I'll do a second final coat, which you guys won't see. It was done off camera, but here's the final look at what we have. I think these came out so cute, but you definitely have to let me know in the comments which is your favorite. Do you prefer the vibes of the Moody Swirl, or are you more of a Winter Wonderland leopard print swirl kind of gal or guy? So let me know down in the comment section what you thought, which is your favorite. Thank you guys so much, of course, for watching today's tutorial. Be sure to check out the description box for all of the products I used in today's video. And of course, questions, anything that you want to ask me, certainly leave those in the comments down below. Thanks so much, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!